Thanks for tuning in to Men for the Win, a podcast hosted by David Kufis and Dan Thompson, two avid fans who appreciate well-played baseball, especially when it's done by the Twins. Men for the Win is sponsored by the Grand Group with Edina Realty. Are you looking to purchase a new home in the Twin Cities area? Or perhaps you're trying to sell your current home? Whether you're upsizing or downsizing, the Grand Group with Edina Realty will meet all of your housing needs. Contact the Grand Group by emailing thegran, that's G-R-A-N, group, at edinarealty.com, or call them by phone at 612-817-8751. The Grand Group with Edina Realty, 7-time Minneapolis-St. Paul Magazine Super Agent Award winners.
Men for the Win is part of the Pulltab Sports Network, covering sports, culture, and entertainment across the Midwest. Check them out at pulltabsports.com and give them a follow on all your social media platforms at Pulltab Sports. On this episode, David and Dan recap the Twins' 3-game series against the New York Yankees. Thanks for listening. Enjoy. Thanks for tuning in to Men for the Win. My name is David Kufis. With me, as always, is Dan Thompson. The Twins go to New York and do what the Twins do in New York. They drop the series, but Dan Thompson, they sneak away with one victory. All things considered, Dan, that's pretty decent given the Twins' track record here.
Absolutely. Game 3 was fun. They did not do well at all in games 1 and 2. I mean, I think 4 hits in the 2 games combined. They were not competitive, which is handy for this podcast because we didn't really want to talk about the baseball games all that much in this episode.
No. They're only 6.5 back in the wild card, though, Dan. It's not over.
And Hogue sent us an interesting stat that it was, I think, and maybe he got this from somewhere else, but last year the Twins' record now was the same record as the Tigers' record was last year, and they were down was it 7.5, 9.5, and they still came back and won the wild card. So there really ought to be hope, David, and yet,
with all due respect, sir, I believe this is going to be our finest hour.
I don't know that we're viewing it that way.
It's hard to view it that way, Dan, and I think viewing things within the proper context is very important, and I think a lot of people have trouble with that nowadays. They see things in one context and just assume they can view everything through that same lens, and this Twins team, Dan, this season has been so bizarre as far as all of the different contextual changes that have happened to change our outlook on the team, not just this season, but also the future. We're going to get into the ownership stuff, guys. We are, I promise. We're not going to jump the gun, and honestly, a lot of the segments are going to focus on it. It's a very sad day for Twins fans everywhere. No question, this is a sad day for Twins fans. We're going to go through why that is exactly. The Cliff Notes. The Pohlads have announced that they are indeed retaining ownership. They're pulling the team off the market, but they have brought in 2 new investors, Dan, which I'm sure is going to definitely change the way they're doing things currently.
Hang on to your cynicism. Let's save that just a little bit longer.
Please attempt to be a gentleman.
We got a lot of show to get to. We also need to clean up a few things that we didn't mention last episode. So there's one here. So Ryan Fitzgerald's home run in the Royals series was his first major league hit. And in listening back, I think I was about to say that. Yes. And then we got sidetracked talking about his hair. Which was lovely, obviously.
I'm a little inside baseball here, folks. I was editing this episode after the fact, and I listened back to that part, and I'm like, we never circled back to Dan's initial. Like, Dan's about to talk about how it's Fitzgerald's first hit after 3,000 at-bats in the minors, and it's a home run, and it's so cool. It puts the Twins up and everything. And I'm like, we didn't even touch on that. We were so focused on Dan's stereotyping of people with long hair and different types of long hair that we got distracted.
It was not stereotyping.
I have magic hair that glows when I sing.
It was, I was looking at him and making an assumption or making a comparison, I think.
Dan, that's the definition of stereotype. You're an English teacher. Look it up in the dictionary, Dan. That's stereotyping.
Talked around it there. See, I can talk out of both sides of my mouth. Also, we mentioned author Chris Van Dusen. Many of our listeners have small children. I would recommend all of his books. I wrote him an email just to mention that we had mentioned him because I thought, maybe he'd want to know. And he wrote back immediately that day. Very kind. He's actually a Red Sox fan. I hope, Chris, that you're listening here. I wanted to say to you in another email, but I didn't, was that David and I both have those cool green monster hats. So We'll see. Maybe we'll both have to adopt the Red Sox here, the way things are going here for this franchise.
Can I tell you something, Dan? I honestly considered opening the show wearing the Red Sox hat to show that my allegiance has changed. But I wanted to wear this hat, and there'll be a reason why I'm wearing this hat a little bit later.
Ooh, a little preview. And then we should also give a shout out. We've had a number of new subscribers to the show here over the last couple of weeks.
Wonder why.
Figure. Well,
nothing. Minnesotans like nothing more than being in misery together, Dan. And they're like, you know what? Here's a Twins podcast about two guys super annoyed at the Twins. Why don't I listen to them for a while and get even more upset?
Well, welcome. We'll have more things to talk about here. What an interesting time to be a Twins fan. And Luke Keeschall, I think is how we're supposed to say it,
yes,
was named AL Player of the Week in just his second full week in the majors. So that's pretty dang cool. Bodes well for the future of this franchise.
Okay, that's the last time you're going to hear that phrase this episode.
And I guess with that, let's go ahead and dispense with the series recap.
Series recap.
The imagery you just used, Dan, is like we're going to take this series recap into an alley and shoot it in the back of the head. Let's dispense with this recap. But all right, let's jump in here. Game 1, Twins lose a 2-6. If the Twins, Dan, had anybody left in the bullpen, this game likely would have been a lot more interesting. But after the 6th inning, I mean, Zebby Matthews does a pretty good job, all things considered. 5 2/3, 6 hits, 3 earned runs, all on solo shots, 1 walk, but 9 strikeouts, Dan. 9 strikeouts against the Yankees. That's something he can hang his hat on.
Yeah, the first of those solo home runs was in the bottom of the 4th when Cody Bellinger had a really good series for the Yankees, belted one. But that was really the only damage done. Also, an interesting play where Buxton is credited with an error in center, which allowed a runner to advance to third. I don't know. Do you think it was a legit error here?
It was a little bit weird. Anytime we're talking about advancement errors, I get it. Like, yes, Buck made a mistake here, but he's knocking the rust off from the IL. I'd much rather have him commit an error like this that really doesn't mean anything here than have 3 games with the Saints before he comes back to the major league level.
Yeah, bottom of the 3rd, the Yankees get a couple more solo home runs, but then the top of the 6th and the 7th, the Twins get some of their own. Buxton hits one, Larnach hits one, so they trail by 1 and entering the bottom of the 7th, which is kind of your point about the bullpen.
Then it's trouble, Dan. Brooks Kriske, which alls I can think, Dan, is Rice Krispie bars every single time. Like, I read that and I'm thinking, man, Rice Krispie bar right now. He gets into trouble in the bottom of the 7th. He allows 2 more to the Yankees, and then the Yankees add 1 more on a solo shot from Jazz Chisholm, which is a third of the number of home runs he hit in the Derby, for those of you who remember.
Ooh, yes,
so
bird, yeah.
The Twins lose this one 6-2. Dan, go ahead and take away game 2 here.
Yeah, game 2, the Yankees win this one 9-1. Opens well. Austin Martin hits.
So many of your statements are only relevant for the next 4 seconds of the podcast.
Well, no, I wanted to play his sounder.
Oh,
that's why. Yes. Yeah, that's why I said his name.
I see.
Because of the Aston Martin. He's so fast, David. Anyway,
I do support. You're right. You did clarify
okay.
when you brought up the sounder to Hogs that I was the one who wanted a James Bond one.
Thank
so
you.
You've done well in that regard.
I appreciate that. But the Twins don't get another hit after that. They do load the bases and kind of score in a lame way where Royce Lewis grounds out to short. I don't know how he actually legged that out, but he did. So that's a good thing. Meanwhile, then there's the Travis Adams, Thomas Hatch, or I would rather call it Hatch Adams, which is...
It's like a pun. It's a play on words.
It's late, Dan. Perfect. It's late for that.
Look, the movie. Anyway, but that piggyback doesn't seem to go well. Adams only gets into the 3rd inning, allows 4 runs. Hatch does get 13 outs, but he walks 7 players. That's so many walks, David. It's a Twins record for a relief pitcher, though. I don't know. The piggyback should allow for an extra column, I think, to go in the record books.
Well, this is just like what we talked about with the whole, if you're going to have an opener for 2 or 3 innings and then your true starter comes in, there's all of these different funny ways that you're playing with how the box score is going to look, where the stats aren't really reflective of what the stats should reflect.
Twins use Funderburk and Sands for the final 4 outs there. Carlos Rodon goes 7 1/3. No trouble after that 1st inning. Only, I think, 1 other base runner. He strikes out 5. Judge, Volpe, Stanton, homer. Stanton has 4 hits, 3 RBI. Yankees draw 11 walks, which has got to be some kind of a record. And then we move on to game 3, David.
The only positive moments here, Dan, in the series. Twins win this one 4-1. Slow start for the Twins. They're hitless until the 4th. By then, they're down 1-0 because of a Bellinger home run, because that's all the Yankees do. Which, to be fair, if the wall at Target Field was also at 200 feet, the Twins would hit a lot of home runs also. But top of the 4th, they get 1 in that inning on an RBI ground out by Keeschall. And then top of the 6th, we're going to talk about it a little bit later here, but that's when the Twins really struck gold, or as much as they can, at Yankee Stadium, I guess.
Joe Ryan is pulled with a runner at 2nd and 2 outs in the 7th, 102 pitches. I was a little worried. But Cody Funderburk comes in, K's Austin Wells for out number 3, and then Justin Topa gets the last 6 outs. Just one base runner, which was actually erased by a ground in the double play in the bottom of the 9th. And the Twins win. It's their first win at Yankee Stadium in a couple years, since 23. Last year they got swept there. Also, if it's been a while since you've revisited your male grooming products, Duke Cannon has you covered. They make high-quality grooming products for hardworking men. Minnesota-based with an all-new look, their clean new packaging features the Big D, and it's unmistakable on the shelves. Whether you go for a brick of soap, thick body wash, deodorant, hair care, beard care, cologne, Duke Cannon will have you smelling your best. Look for that Big D at Target, Walmart, Amazon, or DukeCannon.com. Once you try it, you'll be hooked. Work harder, smell better. Duke Cannon.
Touch 'em all, Kirby Puckett!
Puckett's Picks winner.
Well, you're trying your best, Dan. To make this interesting, Dan comes away with the victory here, taking Buxton, who had 6, taking the risk, not knowing if Buxton for sure would come off the IL. And then it's a 3-way tie, it looks like, Dan. Am I reading that right?
It's correct. So listeners took Keyshaw, Hogs took Lewis, kind of because we gave him Lewis because he was finishing some kind of giant run. And then you took Jeffers. So we don't really worry about the listeners' tiebreak for picking purposes later because they always pick first anyway. But you actually won the tiebreak because Jeffers had 2 strikeouts and Lewis had 4.
You never want to do well if you didn't
Exactly.
win. You always want to do the worst. But season standings here now, Hogs is still in the lead with 15. Dan's at 12.5. So Dan, you are actually, this is much closer than I thought it would be after last series. Then the listeners at 10.5, they're unlikely unless they go on a crazy run. And then I'm at 8.5. I'm clearly out of it. But honestly, I would rather have you win than Hogs because alls we would hear all off season is about how he won Puckett's picks, and I just don't want to deal with that.
Didn't you
Dan.
talk about that all last offseason when you won Puckett's picks?
Yeah, I like it when
see.
I
Okay.
get to do it, Dan. There's nothing wrong with
Notably,
that.
actually, that was the first time I've gotten the bonus points or the bonus half point the entire
Oh.
season. So I felt pretty good about that. Buxton came through with that 6
Well
as the
done.
team high.
Beast versus Bench.
Is losing fun? Is losing fun?
All right, so I think I'll just go first because I'm talking about the baseball games. So I'm going to give my beast to Joe Ryan for his great start, for kind of being that paragon in the starting rotation right now. To have such a start at Yankee Stadium when the Twins needed to avoid a sweep, that was pretty cool. My bench, I'm going with Eddie Julian, actually.
Oh, Canada.
Not making the best of this opportunity. 0 for 6. Just kind of a non-factor. Where's the Eddie from a couple years ago who hit a home run in the playoffs?
I don't know, but he's got to figure it out because if he wants to play first base for this team next season, this is your audition, man. You're not getting another shot after this. You need to be on it, and you need to be ready and prepared to make contact or get on base somehow. And we should note, too, the first game of this series, the umpiring was horrendous. And Eddie got a couple of bad calls. He should have actually been on base twice with walks, but he wasn't because the ump, anything on the outside corner for lefties or the inside for righties was called a strike. I mean, up to like 2 inches outside the zone. It was kind of ridiculous.
David, what do you got here?
Okay, I'm breaking the rules a little bit here.
No.
My beast, Dan, is half, probably more like 70% of the Minnesota media. And this is what I want to say. We're going to talk so much about the ownership stuff, but half of the Minnesota media understand the insanity that is the Pohlads' decisions here regarding this Twins team over the last couple of seasons. Dan Barrero, Hogue sent a great clip from his show, him just kind of going off and explaining the textbook nature with which the Pohlads have messed up this franchise and have totally disappointed and screwed over the fan base. And I think that there's a lot of guys on X who are really, really sort of understanding and encompassing the way that the fan base feels. So that's what I want to say is I appreciate those Minnesota media members who aren't trying to sweep this under the rug or looking at the bright side and finding the silver lining of the rain clouds. There's nothing to be found here that you should be happy about now that the full picture has come into focus. My bench, Dan, is the other half of Minnesota media, or 40%, because there are people who will take the perspective that, well, it's a business and the Pohlads are making the decision that's best for the business and their perspective. They're out to make money. We've had this argument so many times on the show, I'm getting tired of it. You should own a baseball team as a vanity project to spend money and win championships. And if you're in it simply for the dollars and cents, get into a different business that doesn't have a whole bunch of people caring so much about this business, supposedly, that you're in charge of. You're making terrible decisions. I can't go buy stock in the Minnesota Twins, right? I can't do that. I don't get a say in how the Minnesota Twins are owned or managed or decisions or whatever they make. All I have is my dollars to spend at Target Field. We're going to talk about this in a little bit, but I do not like Minnesota media members defending the Pohlads based on the perspective that, well, they're owners and they're doing what's best for the bottom line. I don't care that that's their rationale. I don't agree that that should be their rationale. So don't give me the company line here about how they're doing what's best and look at our farm system. They're number 2 in the MLB.
Yeah, so if you want to read about this, I think one of the good ones to go to is Phil Miller in the Star Tribune actually talked to Joe Pohlad about this. And so it is interesting to kind of parse some of the things that he said there. So first of all, he calls this a robust and detailed process, Joe Pohlad did, of this sale, which is, we're going to talk more about that a little bit later too. But he has this addressing skeptical fans here. He says, it's my job and this new ownership group's new job to do everything we can to set this organization up for success, hopefully in the short and long term both. I look forward to it. Other things that he said, I don't think we could have imagined a better outcome than where we landed. Interesting. We found 2 great partners and have already developed some pretty solid relationships with them. There is alignment on how we see Twins baseball moving forward and also in our belief in the future of baseball in Minnesota. Do you notice the way that he's talking can be interpreted in multiple ways here? You know, like he's saying things that are very safe company line and also totally tone deaf to the reality of what fans are feeling. And obviously we don't know the Pohlads personally. They could be wonderful people, but the way that they talk about managing, but the way that they talk about owning a baseball team doesn't seem to appreciate or understand why people like baseball teams. You know, they don't seem to understand the investment, obviously of time and money, but just emotional investment that people have in teams. Now we can debate whether people should be or not, but the reality is that they do. And I wonder, is it because his family has owned it for so long and he kind of inherited it? This is not like, you know, he's not the one who bought the team originally, but it's a weird reaction that doesn't seem to take it just, to me, shows the distance that they have between the common people and the people like them who own baseball teams and see it as an investment and not something fun. It's just, it's very weird. And it's in such contrast to the ownership of the other teams, certainly the Vikings and the Timberwolves now. You know, you could argue Craig Leopold with the Wild maybe has a little bit more of a businessness to it. I guess my takeaway is it's sad to me that this is how distant they are from the reality of what it's like to be a baseball fan.
The problem is the Pohlads, when they're in these interviews, their conversation and their perspective is strictly about the Pohlads' perspective about how things have gone, which is not the perspective that any fan wants to hear. Mm-hmm. Because what the fans want to hear is we, the fan base and the ownership, think that this is a good outcome. Now, he wouldn't say that, I would hope. I mean, you can be tone deaf and you can be dumb. There is a line there, and that would be crossing both of those lines to say something like that both the ownership and the fans should be happy with how things have come about here. But I think that's what irks fans more than anything, is the ownership group is setting itself up against the fan base, clearly distancing themselves from the perspective of the fan. And either, again, maybe they're oblivious to it, or maybe, as Barrero said brilliantly, maybe a billionaire just doesn't take the advice or counsel of anyone, and so they're not even listening.
All right, well, let's shift this conversation towards the manager of this baseball team, Rocco Baldelli.
Rocco's Rewind.
So, Dan, do you think the morning of the game, Rocco just gathers the pitchers and just says, who wants to pitch today? Like, there's not really a rhyme or reason anymore at this point, right? Like, he just goes in and he hopes for the best and he sees who's up to pitch today. I don't think he's not scheming, right? He's not like looking over his cards and thinking, who should we have up in the bullpen here? The only decision he ever has to make is if the Twins are up, he's going to put Topa in. Other than that, it's whoever raises their hand. Maybe they do nose goes in the morning. How do they do this, Dan?
I do think that this has got to be freeing for him because nobody's going to question his bullpen choices right now because he has none of his high leverage guys anymore. I think that this is going to be an interesting time to see who can pitch. It's been very interesting. Topa's actually been quite good over the last 5 or 6 outings.
Yeah.
Even Cole Sands has looked pretty good. So some of these guys, Funderburk hasn't been totally implosive the way that he was before. I think that maybe some of these guys could earn enough to stick around next season.
They could. I mean, the one thing I wanted to point out too that I thought was an interesting take, I think it was Phil Mackey, it might have been Judd Zulgad on the Score North Twins show, but what they had said was that they think Rocco is now able to manage the way that Rocco would prefer to manage, where previously he's been really put in a box as far as the decisions that he could make. And I think there's probably some truth to that, where Rocco has a lot of freedom now to do what he wants with young athletic guys stealing bases, putting the hit and runs on, those sorts of things that he didn't really have the option to do when, again, your roster was sort of cemented in and you knew what you were getting. So I think it's interesting, at least from that perspective, that these games are fun to watch, looking at what Rocco decides to do, which is probably quite different than he even had the ability to do as early as 3 weeks ago.
Well, I think it's because he doesn't have Carlos Correa secretly trying to manage behind him, David. I think that's pretty obvious.
Well, yeah, didn't you see that clip of Rocco trying to signal Watkins and Correa was behind him giving him other signs?
Why are you so obsessed with me?
Sorry. I just, Carlos Correa and I. My question to you for Rocco here is, how do you think it feels for him to be totally not the most disliked or questioned person in the organization? Does he feel, is it freeing also to have that emotional cover of the Pohlads and even Falvey kind of standing in front of him?
Yeah, I'm a llama again.
I think, Dan, that after the trade deadline, Rocco's perspective was still that there's a lot of questions in the media about whether or not he's actually going to keep his job, right? But now, after the news broke, I do think he is very free feeling at this point because his option was picked up for next season. There's absolutely no reason to change managers at this juncture.
No.
So, yeah, I think he feels very free and he's so happy to be a llama again.
I mean, we will see because the lineup is obviously more flexible now. It's faster. You got guys like Austin Martin and Keishel out there. So maybe there's something to that. Maybe there is something to the idea that you can get younger, you can get more athletic, and by shedding Correa and by shedding some of these other guys off of the roster, even guys like Bader and Castro are good, but they're not. I don't know. There's an invigoration of youth that isn't entirely bad right now. It's a bummer that they are out of contention. And again, we've talked about this. If Keishel had been available, I think it looks so different if Keishel is healthy.
Oh, no question. Especially knowing they're only 6.5 back from the wild card. Let's assume conservatively Keishel is like a 2.5 WAR player. Okay, well now you're talking 4 games back in the wild card up to this point.
Mm-hmm.
Minnesota moment.
I'll go with the baseball one first. I think Cody Clemens' RBI double in Game 3 that brought in a couple guys that gave the Twins a lead here at Yankee Stadium at another place that his dad was famous. And again, man, was he effective. Say what you will about Roger Clemens, but 354 career wins. So I thought that was a cool moment. It was an important moment for the Twins. Clemens also ends up scoring later on an RBI double by Royce Lewis. Actually hit right. I think it was Paul Molitor pointed out very much in the spot where Joe Mauer's double that wasn't in that playoff game that Phil Cuzzy called foul. So that was thanks, Paul, for really twisting the memory knife there. So that's my moment. What about you?
I had a very full day today, Dan. Okay, I had to wake up early. I had some deadlines I had to meet. And then I had this team building, strength finding, communication-y thing with our whole unit, right? So I went straight from meeting these deadlines into this thing and then a happy hour and then a church picnic. It was a very long day. I'm very tired as we're recording this podcast, Dan. When I was in Indianapolis, I was sitting in
Are you coming to your point?
Nice,
at some point here, this is like a
room.
very long introduction to what you're trying to say here.
I'll get there.
Sometimes I'll start a sentence and I don't even know where it's going. I just hope I find it along the way.
So when I was in Indy, Dan, and my phone is just exploding with all of the deadline news that's happening, and I have people texting me who don't even follow baseball asking me about my thoughts and all that. Today, Dan, when the news broke that the Pohlads were not selling the team, I think I may have gotten more text messages this time than from the trade deadline, which is pretty impressive. But the thing is, this happened, Dan, like 20 minutes before I'm going to go into this 5-hour training with our whole unit in this like team building thing. So of course I'm starting off not well, Dan, not well. I'm upset. I'm like trying to get my feelings. I'm trying to wrap my head around all of the different things that this means. So my Minnesota moment is my frantic depression that I had to fit into like a 12-minute box before I entered this team training. But it really, it was a very pressure-filled 12 minutes of me trying to like beautiful mind out everything that this means for the upcoming off season, which I think, Dan, that's a pretty good transition here into Mauer's musings.
I just don't know how it can get any better.
Mauer's musings.
So my first question, Dan, when did the Pohlads know they weren't going to sell? Did they ever actually intend to sell? And did they know before they made the moves at the trade deadline that they weren't going to sell?
I don't think that they thought it would do this. Like, I don't think there's some grand scheme of manipulation here behind this. But I do think that I don't believe what they said in that Phil Miller interview where it all came together very last minute and this and that. I think they had to have had an inkling that things weren't going well. I don't think they were getting the asking price that they wanted. I think that they saw that maybe taking on partners was maybe just a way to deal with the debt that they had acquired during COVID and things like that. Yeah. Like the team lost some money, as every baseball team did. Even though they have lots of other investment. Anyway, we've been down that road. So I do think that this was not how they intended it to go. I do wonder, did they regret the idea? And why would they want to own the team still? What was it, just that they couldn't get the money and they're trying to spin it in a way that says, oh, we're so happy with this? That seems the most likely, because if they wanted to sell the team, they could have sold the team. They just didn't get as much money as they wanted, as back in the transaction. That's what it makes sense to me. That's the simplest solution.
I think that Barrero's point again was so great because he basically said, "Can you imagine Joe Pohlad going to the rest of the front office and saying, 'Yay, we're going to keep the team after all'?" Like, somebody should have said in that moment, "You can't. You've burned all the bridges. This is the last option. You have jumped out of the plane. Now it's just the parachute of your $1 billion landing, protecting you."
But they don't have to. They don't have to say that. I mean,
Barrero's thought is, that's the thing. That's the thing. But the problem is, he has burned his last bridge. There's no fan base here. There's nobody out here who likes them at all. There's no defense of what they've done here. This is ridiculous. As somebody who's been a fan for his entire life, who wants nothing more than to see this organization win a World Series, to watch an ownership group actively work against the goal of winning a World Series is depressing as much as anything in sports can be.
I do think that they believe they can win here, but they want to do it in a very camel through the eye of the needle kind of way. I mean, like, the fact that they want to do it with a 20th ranked or lower MLB payroll doesn't happen. I mean, this is a pretty rare thing. If you want to think back to the Oakland Athletics, in the Billy Beane era, they didn't win a World Series during that stretch. They lost to the Twins in the play. I mean, they didn't make deep runs. There's a ceiling to that strategy in baseball, in a sport that you don't have to have that strategy. You can spend basically as much money as you want. You don't have to do it that way. I don't quibble necessarily with the idea of tearing the team down, though I am a little annoyed with how Correa's stuff went down and all that. But like, you can do that. Like, that is a strategy, but it looks so bad when you're never willing to reinvest that money after you had invested some of that money in Carlos Correa, and Pablo Lopez, and giving some guys some contracts. It's so it's just inconsistent. It's not even a good strategy to change course just like that. I don't know. Well, let me ask you this question back to you as kind of my musing. Will you actually cancel your season tickets? Because you gave quite the long, but I don't know if you've actually hit send on the email to the rep quite yet. I don't even know if you want to maybe you want to talk to the rep one more time. Maybe you want to string the rep along, have a few more conversations.
Yeah, I'm planning to call tomorrow, and if they don't offer anything, I'm done. And honestly, I don't even know what they could offer at this point, because I can't rightfully give money to the Pohlads at this point. Now, Hogs was off this bandwagon a while ago, right? Hogs is done. Hogs has been done since the trade deadline. He's so upset. Well, I'm sort of thinking, again, in context of the trade deadline, understanding that new ownership was coming, I could justify the trade deadline. I could understand the moves that were made a little bit. Some of them harder to understand or justify than others, but I could at least see it, Dan. I could see the plan here. As soon as they said that we're keeping the team, the trade deadline no longer makes any sense. All this means is that in the offseason, they're going to trade Joe Ryan. They're going to trade Pablo Lopez. They're going to trade Bailey Ober, assuming that he finishes out the season strong. And I'm not sure what to do with that information other than, okay, so this team's not going to be competitive for 3 to 4 years. Things would have to bounce so well if they're not going to spend any money, if their payroll is going to be like $40 million. Like, what are we supposed to think here? The only thing that Pohlads could do right now, like, because we'll need to see the offseason, if instead we wake up tomorrow and ESPN drops an article about how the Twins have extended Joe Ryan on a 5-year deal for $150 million, and they've whatever the number, I'm just sure whatever, and they've extended Pablo Lopez for 3 years and such amount. Like, all of a sudden you're like, okay, so you actually at least have a plan for who are going to be your building blocks moving forward. But I don't even know that can save them at this point, Dan. It feels dirty to give money to people who do not care at all about this baseball team. Because if they did, they wouldn't do this, Dan. They wouldn't do everything that they've done. They should have done the opposite. And it's just infuriating at this point that, like, clearly they have no clue. They have no idea what it's like to actually love this baseball team and love baseball in general. And they have no desire to bring a World Series back to the Minnesota Twins unless it's gifted to them somehow through some miraculous organizational structure that leads to a whole bunch of young guys getting hot at just the right time. And that's a lottery ticket, Dan. This is ridiculous.
Okay, so this is what's interesting to me about this whole thing, and I have reflected all day about this. Nothing really is different now than it's been for the last 40 years with this franchise. This is how they have operated for their entirety. This is my entire lifetime, I think my math is right there.
I'm a man. I'm 40.
Which I think is about... Anyway, so I don't actually think that anything is different than it has been before. It feels more bare. You know, like we're seeing behind the curtain a little bit that this is how they've actually felt. So in many ways, yes, obviously this is disappointing. But as Twins fans, we've never had anything different than this, really. We've always had ownership groups like this that don't really want to invest more than they have to. What's disappointing is that we had the hope that somebody else was going to buy this team,
yes,
and that things were going to be different, yes, and now they're not. And it's kind of like, I don't know, maybe you were going to buy this wonderful home, and then like the mortgage fell through, or you couldn't, or something.
Ogres are like onions.
But in the end, it wasn't going to happen. So it's not different. So I might still be a season. I'm a Mariners season ticket holder now, but I don't know that I would cancel them just because of this. I think I would take a step back and be like, well, and it doesn't feel good to give Pohlads money, but you've been giving them the money anyway. You just didn't know their true colors until now.
I think the hope is the difference here. The fact that we thought we were getting new owners and then they pulled that out. I now know what my kids feel like when I say, yeah, we can definitely go to the park. And then we look outside the window and it's pouring rain. And there's no way that we're going to the park. And it's my fault, right? Because I said we could go to the park. And that's all my children can understand is, well, Dad, you said we were going to the park.
Ogres are like onions.
What do you want me to do here, kids?
That is a good analogy. We should move on here. We actually have to grade this series, David. That's what we do.
Series grades.
Game 3 was the only game where you had a good showing, I'd say. If you had a bullpen in Game 1 and a real starter in Game 2, you might have been actually competitive in all 3 of these games, Dan, but that's not the case. I'm going to give them a C- here. There was one note I wanted to make about a New York Post article that was basically how the Yanks get back on track using their normal punching bag, the Minnesota Twins, which is so sad but so true.
So true. I know. I was wondering. I read a lot of the doom and gloom articles about the Yankees before this series, and I was like, guys, you people at The Athletic must not have been around New York long enough to know. Like, this is the perfect time for you guys.
Yes.
For me here, so I went momentum -1 on the pendulum, largely just because of the stuff in the background. It didn't really change that much on the field. Decision making, a +2. I thought Rocco did as well as he could with the players available. With the old guys, I gave him a +2 because I thought Jeffers played pretty well. I thought Buxton played well. Joe Ryan played well. But the youth, I gave him a -2. Keishel didn't have a great series. Wallner did not have a great series, though. Congratulations on having a child. But then also, Austin Martin with a lot of just non-factors from these young guys. So that maths out to a 13 out of 20, which is a D.
And you know what else gets a D? You ever been out on a boat, Dan, and like your buddy's like, you got to see this new thing I got. And they take like what looks like one of those old gym wrestling mats and they like chuck it in the water and you like step on it and it kind of sinks and you're all of a sudden in like 6 inches of water and they're like, isn't this so cool? Well, Dan, yeah, it's great to be on a lake. We love it. But when you find yourself, Dan, on a cramped boat and you want that extra space, don't go to those gym mats, Dan. What you need is an aqueduct from Rave Sports. Don't settle for the weaker option from the other guys because if you have a Lily, you're just being silly. The aqueduct from Rave is the goat of the float. Unlike the saggy, hard-to-roll-up competition, the aqueduct blows up easy, is the perfect 10x10 size, and is just as sturdy as the dock you walked out to your boat on. So what are you waiting for? Give your pontoon the water patio it's always wanted and pick up an aqueduct at ravesports.com. And remember to use promo code PULLTAB for 20% off your order. Rave Sports, make waves.
I don't know, Jack. It looked like Herbeck pulled him off the bag.
Herbie's headlines.
I don't know where to start, Dan. There is a lot of news here that we have to discuss. Maybe we start with your guy.
Why are you so obsessed with me?
This is so frustrating. The Astros greeted Carlos Correa with a standing ovation. Like, oh, you poor man. You had to leave us for so long. and now you're back. Are they oblivious to the fact that they cheated?
Dan.
Do they not understand that like they shouldn't be cheering for people like this?
Have you met people from Texas, Dan?
Yeah, I have. I've been from Texas. They lived in anyway. So that bummed me out. The Astros, by the way, have been caught by the Seattle Mariners. I'm going to switch my hat. The Mariners are playing very well, David. I may even have to get some playoff tickets. You just never know. I get in line right away here. There's an ownership group right there that cares about baseball.
The Brewers also, we should mention, they're on a 12-game winning streak, one shy of the Twins' league-high 13. Remember those days, Dan?
Oh, man.
Remember those days when we were happy?
There's a promotion there that now everybody in Milwaukee gets a free cheeseburger from a place called George Webb because they went on a 12-game winning streak. That's just like a long-standing thing that they've done. So if you live in Milwaukee, go get your free cheeseburger, apparently.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
One quick Minnesota Twins note. The new top 100 prospects dropped, and the Twins have none in the top 10, which after the trade deadline, they should have at least one. Jenkins is number 14. Tait is 54. Keyshaw is 64, though he's not really a prospect at this point. Rodriguez, 72, and Culpepper, 77. So that's good, I guess. But again, we shouldn't be excited about a farm system when this team could have been competitive had the Twins decided to make a few different moves at the deadline.
I also love this note. Shohei Ohtani is being sued about a Hawaiian real estate deal. You can Google this. Sounds made up.
Yes.
I guess we got to put our tinfoil hats on.
It's like $250 million. Who does this guy hang out with? Like, what on earth is happening? Like, what mobsters is he tied up with between the betting allegations and the real estate deals? Turns out he also, Dan, he is actually in charge of waste removal in New York. I don't know if you knew that.
He's much too trusting. Your guy, Pete Alonso, by the way, broke the Mets home run record. It was 252, held by Darryl Strawberry for, I think, like 3 decades. But now Alonso is at 254. Yeah. Where's your Mets hat, David? Are you going to switch there? And you never even told us about your Twin Cities hat that you were wearing.
Oh, yeah. So I was wearing my Twin Cities hat because this is my Twins member hat. And I'm just not sure how much longer I'm going to be able to
tear it
wear
off your head and
say my Twins
throw
member
it to the ground and stomp on it. Is that what you're going to do here?
We'll see. Maybe you convinced me to hang on to my tickets for some reason. I don't know why that would be. But all right, well, let's push here, Dan. Let's make our Puckett's picks for the upcoming Tigers series. The Twins are only 12 games back, Dan. If they sweep these 4, it's only 8 games. But let's make our picks.
And we'll see you tomorrow night. Puckett's picks.
Hoax thinks we're crazy for having any hope here, by the way. The listeners are going to stick...
Oh, to have hope, yes, is silly.
But yes.
Certainly.
The listenors are going to stick with Luke Keeschel.
I have magic hair that glows when I sing.
Then it's to Hoax, who's going to take Buxton, and then you, David.
Take correct.
Oh, yeah, you can't do that.
Just kidding. He's got a cast. Oh no!
Why are you so obsessed with me?
Sorry, let me look at. Let me look at the lineup here. Who's on this team? I guess I could go with Clemens. No, I don't know. Give me Royce Lewis. We'll see. Maybe he's gonna have a bounce back series here.
He is the one.
Fingers crossed. That's the case, Dan.
Well, then that leaves me everybody else here. I'm gonna go. You know, let's go with Brooks Lee. He had some good signs in this series here. I'm gonna go with him. All right, well, I think I'll go ahead and send us out, David. Folks, if you like what you hear, please tell a friend. You can follow us on X at Men for the Win and find our Men for the Win Facebook and Instagram pages. Make sure you're subscribed to the podcast on your favorite platforms so you're notified when new episodes are available. And if you could leave us a rating or like, we'd greatly appreciate it. If you'd like to support the show further, you can find us on Patreon. The link is in the description. Thank you for listening, and as always, go Twins. That'll wrap up another episode of Men for the Win, a podcast hosted by David Kufis and Dan Thompson, 2 avid fans who appreciate well-played baseball, especially when it's done by the Twins. Thanks so much for listening, and as always, go Twins.